We, a cycle of civilization, is reaching its end. It is difficult to achieve by resisting it and by directly opposing the forces in motion. The current is too strong. One would be overwhelmed, of course. The essential thing is not to let oneself be impressed by omnipotent and apparent triumph of the forces of the epoch. These forces, devoid of connection with any higher principle, are in fact on a short chain. One should not become fixated on the present and on things at hand, but keep in view the conditions that may come about in the future. Thus, the principle to follow could be that of letting the forces and processes of this epoch take their own course, while keeping oneself firm and ready to intervene when, quote, the tiger, which cannot leap on the person riding it, is tired of running. The Christian injunction, resist not evil, may have a similar meaning. End quote. Aquarius, Kali Yoga, the death and awakening of a new world, they both hold the principle of flux, something dormant in the shape of water when not carried, when not given purpose. But when epochs die in the untethering for another, the shape of chaos proceeds before transcendence, whereby water is given time for the flood. The death of God was the breaking of the mightiest carrier, that which held all life force towards a transcending power of purpose for many. But when it shattered, it produced the greatest flood of all, whereby man was condemned to be free in not knowing the purpose of his own freedom. As time fell, so did the waters, whereby rivers stopped crashing and puddles began to form. Large puddles of pessimism and comfort, to slowly sleep and steep in wasting existence, to then be evaporated by the sun. These were those who lived best under commands. Instead of affirming an attempt to answer to God's death, they instead, like puddles, became plagued with placidity and dullness, and accepted that as their undying fate. This is what Nietzsche called, of course, the last man. But what can a bridge be to the Superman, as he always goes on about? Can a bridge to the Übermensch truly be developed by a man acting out of immanence, as being the replacement of the transcendent? The relationship between man and any higher power of transcendence, being the root of morality, is broken. You may replace this, as we have with, utilitarian or social ethics of law, but to the common stamp of modern nihilism, all that it enforces is its justification being a hollow repetition of thou shalt, which give way at its foundation in many an instance. The same with Kantian imperatives, you could say, being an assumption of axiomatic values that are of particular unexplained premises, that have lost any intrinsic form and is simply that which has superseded religion. Moralities that are, in other words, shaded in hidden nihilism. For once the ground of the higher world of God is shaken, many emanations dissolve. Thus man's method to make do with the death of God is to be an active affirmer and move on with the truth of what has come, that nihilism turns into a sign of strength, that the power to create is beyond the need of interpretation or any introduction of meaning, that man can bear a meaningless life and at the same time organize it through his creation of will, what Nietzsche called, of course, the pessimism of strength, accepting that the only true world is that which was negated and rejected by the former. But if we are to have a complete affirmation of life through the instincts and passions, are we not to surrender the quality of being for the world of frenzy? That instead there is a principle superior to that which simply arises from life, that in which Evola writes, I quote, "The spirit is the life which cuts through life," end quote. That the spirit which exists within us strikes towards a realm of transcendence and is beyond the mere affirmation of immanence. A possible contradiction within Nietzsche's thought being found in his hard affirmation of naturalism is that if man is a bridge which leads from the beast to the Superman, then overcoming it is only possible through the premise of the existence of two opposing worlds and natures. This is a point by Evola that he sees contradicts Nietzsche's affirmation of naturalism and materialism to reach the higher man. In his book Ride the Tiger, he writes the following, I quote, "On the one hand, we have the theme of a pure naturalistic exaltation of life, albeit in forms that betray a surrender of being to the simple world of instincts and passions. For the absolute affirmation of the latter on the part of the will runs the danger of their asserting themselves through the will, making it their servant." End quote. Thus Evola presents virtues in an attempt to go beyond, in some way or manner, Nietzsche's Übermensch, one in which he claims holds elements for the man of tradition, whereby through such values are ones only attainable by those who see more and want more than just mere life itself, and the kind of rules go as follows. 1. The power of making a law for oneself. 2. The natural and free asceticism moved to test its strength by gauging. 3. The principles of not obeying the passions but of holding them on a leash. 4. The idea that the superior man is distinguished from the inferior by his intrepidity and by his defiance of unhappiness. 5. The recognition that one of the ways to preserve a superior species of man is to claim the right to exceptional acts as attempts at victory over oneself and as acts of freedom, to assure oneself with a sort of asceticism a preponderance and a certitude to one's own strength of will. 6. The highest type of the free man being seen in he who always overcomes the strongest resistances, great danger making him a being worthy of veneration. 7. To denounce the insidious confusion between discipline and enfeeblement, and holding that indulgence can only be objected to it in the case of him who has no right to it, and when all the passions have been discredited thanks to those who are not strong enough to turn them to their own advantage. And 8. To point the way to those who, free from all bonds, obeying only their own law, are unbending in obedience to it and above every human weakness. All those aspects, in fine, in which Superman is not the blonde beast of prey and the heir to the equivocal Virtus to Renaissance despots, but is also capable of generosity, quick to offer manly aid of generous virtue, magnanimity and superiority to his own individuality. Evola sees the Superman as not going any further beyond the beast or demon of Dostoevsky in his novel, pointing out that he commits a reductio ad absurdum in his argument. But Nietzsche rightfully claims that to fight away the instincts within one person is the definition of decadence itself. But when such views are taken to its extreme, is balanced by Evola's claim that it is a sign of regression when pleasure begins to be considered as the highest principle. Because the act of instinct can become a decadent affair, obviously, as too much of anything can become poisonous, of course, whereby the ambitious virtues found within the instincts diffuse when there is a lack of self-discipline towards stabilizing them towards a transcendent goal in life. It can convert to pleasures rather than happiness brought by virtue, for pleasure is not the same as happiness and is often the cheap replacement out of a lack in discipline to reach a higher life, founded by courage. But insight to psychology can further help the development towards respect for the Nietzschean affirmation of the Dionysian instincts, because you could very well hypothesize that madness and chaotic disturbance inflicted upon others in the modern world by people are simply done to the fact that they never listened to their instincts to ground themselves into reality to begin with, but rather that the resentful man or woman who leads themselves into projected tyrannical power only becomes so out of their own past cowardice, hating the life he lives or she lives when seeing other life that they desire to embody but never could, of course, all because they denied to listen to their instincts of the body within to ground their reality. to in return fall into the complete opposite of bodily attention and attention to the instincts, which would be, psychological complex, psychological delusion, jargonism, pre-planned madness for revenge, on a projection that is not themselves, to therefore never avenge themselves from the sadness that he or she lives. This, I think, clears the negative attention attributed to the instincts or to the Dionysian affirmation, that the moralist labels the instincts as that which creates evil or is the act of evil in the world, when really it is the psychology of the individual who rejects the instincts entirely that causes the creation of a perverted will to power in the world. Or it is those who bastardize such philosophy as an excuse for their psychotic will. For example, during his time, the idea of the Übermensch charmed many anti-Semites, and which in return made Nietzsche, I quote, laugh very much, as he detested systems of thought regarding ethnicity and race, of course, and those which try to produce a monopoly over everything through totalitarian methods of control.